I want to buy a copy of Bone Storm. Here's 99 cents.
Allow me to summarize the proposed transaction. You wish to purchase Bone Storm for 99 cents. Net profit to me, negative $59. Oh, please take my $59. I don't want it. It's yours.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. As many of you know, as comic book fans, the comic book cover is like the billboard. It's that piece of advertising that says you need to get in here and read this goddamn comic. Look at what we're telling you is going to happen on the inside. Doesn't feel like that happens all the time on the outside of comic books anymore, but we certainly had our share of classic covers in the past, and I want to have this conversation with my good friend Doc, the X-Men historian, the Marvel aficionado. How you doing, Doc?
I'm wonderful, sir, and thank you for having me on. I've always been a huge fan of comic book covers. They are quintessentially, they are, they always say don't judge a book by its cover. This is the comic industry saying, judge me by this shit.
Yeah, and that's why there's so much bait and switch kind of within the market today, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because you have a host of really great comic book artists that have just kind of become cover artists. Most notably, you got Alex Ross, J. Scott Campbell.
Yeah,
Peach Momoko's doing a lot of good stuff there. Who was it? Art Germ was the big guy at DC. I haven't seen him around as much lately.
There are a lot of Marvel.
There's a lot of artists out there that can make basically make a living doing cover art only because the demand is there within today's market. Now, Doc, what's your favorite? What?
Adam Hughes.
Okay, Adam Hughes as well. Doc, what's your favorite comic book cover at all times?
I think it's AF-15. It's always been a toss-up between AF-15 and X-Men #1.
X-Men #1 by Jim Lee, the big 3-part cover.
No. The original like Uncanny X-Men #1. We was still called X-Men back then, but X-Men #1, by Jim Lee is also right up there.
Like 5 million copies, didn't it?
I know, but like there's something. His is like Jim Lee's is like the go big version, and the original X-Men #1 it's very like elegant simplicity.
Well, obviously there are a lot of comic book covers that have stood the test of time. You kind of think about ASM 316, Hulk 340, X-Men 141. You can go to ASM 300. A lot of these covers have become quite desirable because they really stood out in the crowd. In today's market, almost everything has variants. A lot of times, it doesn't even matter if it's a milestone. It doesn't matter if it's an important issue. You might have 4 or 5 covers on just a regular fucking Devil Dinosaur number 14 or whatever.
Yeah, and it kills the uniqueness of the A cover. It becomes, you're already psychologically telling people this is not the desirable cover. The desirable one is the 1 in 50 or the 1 in 200 or the 1 in 500. That's the desirable one. So you're already kind of psychologically conditioning your customers that, this is an okay cover, but it's not the good one.
So do you think that this leads to maybe Marvel or DC and other publishers holding back the best covers that they have available for some of these characters or some of these flagship titles to push them on the ratio variants to maybe garner a few more sales and orders from the retailers?
Yeah, actually I do. Something that could have been a wonderfully unique and iconic cover is now going to be relegated to only a few people have it. There's no, you're not going to see that really cool, cover that really stands the test of time, that is reasonably affordable and, available to most people. That's not going to happen anymore.
The only one recent that I can think of, and there's a caveats to this as we get into this, is that Patrick Gleason webhead ASM cover that was really, really cool. And once people saw it, they kind of lost their minds and everybody wanted it.
Yes, that ASM 55. And you know what? Thankfully, they did a lot of the variants were, they were reprint variants or they were virgin variants. but it was still the same art. Okay, it doesn't have the Spider-Man logo, like it doesn't say Amazing Spider-Man, doesn't have the corner box, but it's still the same art, and that can still give it some sort of a timeless or iconic nature to it. But that's really the only one in a while now. Most of the other ones, first of all,
I want to talk about ASM 55 again, because there's a problem here.
Yeah.
So once Marvel sees that this cover is popular, the first thing that they do when they're going to do reprints, they inverse the colors, right? It's the same art, so they change up the color scheme.
Yeah, they did. They did the white on black, then they did the black on white, then they did a red on white or black, and then they did a blue on black. Yeah.
So we're removing the uniqueness of the cover almost immediately by putting it in a billion different covers or colors. And then I think he ended up redoing it like for Miles Morales. Like there's another version of it that was for another comic book. And they end up, because it's Marvel, because it's DC, once they see something's popular, like, oh, popular, let's run it into the ground and make it not cool anymore.
They did it on Venom too. They did it for Venom. What was that? 200, whatever the final issue of Donny Cates Venom was.
When he's in the throne with the big sword.
Yep, they did a variant that was a Venom head with Eddie Brock, his face and Venom's head, but the exact same style with the webbing everywhere there too. It kills the uniqueness.
Yeah, so you have like this cool idea, and of course, because Marvel and DC are so unused to making cool ideas anymore, they immediately make it uncool. Very Vince McMahon like of them, right?
It is. I feel like David Gabriel probably learned from Vince McMahon, or Vince McMahon learned from David Gabriel, one of the two, because goddamn if they're not just pushing just running every halfway decent idea straight into the ground.
Yeah, you can only go to the well or use the gimmick so many times before it loses its cool factor. And it feels like they took the cool factor right off of that really badass cover, which I do think will probably still be desirable here in like 10 years. But they immediately removed the cool factor by running it in the ground within a few months.
Yeah, and they've, that like Spider-Man #1, the Todd McFarlane Spider-Man #1, that was an iconic cover. And yes, they did some reprints of that in different colors.
Another thing that I want to talk about, Doc.
Yeah, and then they did Spider-Man 13, which was the exact same cover, but with him in the black costume. Now, and then after that, the amount of homages to that
the
cover,
homages, yes
it is astounding. But it's still, because it got homaged so many times, it does still keep a little bit of desirability to the original, but they had to wait.
But like the most desirable covers out there right now that are being put out there, a lot of them are homages or straight up reprints from classic art.
Yeah,
because it's overshadowing what the current artists are doing. Even if you have a really cool cover by Alex Ross or J. Scott Cable, but you got this homage to this Todd McFarlane Batman cover. Everyone's like, oh, that one's the cool one, because that's that cover from 30 years ago that people actually liked and was unique at the time.
Yes, and it's trading on nostalgia. It's absolutely trying to get people, you're trying to bring up that feeling of good comic that I really enjoyed the contents of by homaging a cover to that.
I think they're trying to get the feeling of, I already own every homage to this cover, I have to buy that one too.
Well, that's
whether the contents of the inside are actually good or not.
Well, that's also a factor. They're aiming at that market too. I mean, they're aiming at a lot of different, but they're all very, very specific and niche markets that they do this with. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing, but a lot of times it's an obviously pandering thing.
When I think about the amount of comic books that are sold today that are never opened and read, I want to cry.
It's probably getting close.
It's very sad.
It's 1990, probably 2 through about 1994 had a lot of that as well, with people buying, 20, 30 copies of a comic, thinking that down the line they'd put their kids through college with it. And that's fine. That was a big time, but now it's nothing but you're buying the ones that are going to be the iconic and like the remembered comics, the remembered covers are going to be the ones that no one ever read the contents of, because they are going to be those 1 in 500 variants that nobody can really get. It makes me
sad, Doc. I want every comic book to be read.
I do
want
too.
Someone to open it up and enjoy the story, or at least try to enjoy the story.
Hell yeah! I bought a couple of weeks ago. Well, I only have a handful of comics that I own that I have never even opened up. Like if I bought a slabbed book, like my X-Men 1, I never read that copy, but I have read X-Men 1. I just did it in a reprint. That's what the facsimile editions are for. That's so I could actually read these key books that I own. But no, like, I get your point though. I want these books to be read, and I want the covers of them to elicit a memory down the line where it's an iconic cover. And not only are you remembering the cover, but you're remembering the feeling you got when you read the story inside. And none of the modern books are really going to be able to do that. I can basically look at the cover of most X-Men issues between about 150 and actually probably about 100 and 275, maybe 300. And I can remember almost the exact feeling I got when reading that comic. I look at a modern cover and there's no uniqueness to it. They're all
just like really generic, 3 people looking in 3 different directions, perhaps with the silhouette of a villain behind them.
Yeah, they're really bland. I know when Joe Quesada came in 2001, one of his things was no more story related covers. I want like basically pinups as covers. I wanted the iconic.
The story related cover tells you what's in the fucking story.
I know, and it reminds.
Crack it open.
It does, and you know what? For a short period of time, maybe it was necessary to go with a more.
When that dude from Alpha Flight standing over Wolverine looks like he's dead on the cover.
Yes.
I couldn't crack that comic book open fast enough.
Yes, when Vindicator's like looking down over like you thought dead Wolverine, and you're like, holy shit, I gotta read this. And then you remember, but you look back at that cover now and you remember the feeling reading that comic.
Days of Future Past, we got all those wanted posters that look like everyone's been killed off in the future.
Hell yeah. And the next issue where with a Sentinel blasting Wolverine to bits on the cover, you remember the feeling inside, and it's directly related to the story. Now you put 50 different, even
I think you just remember the artist if you like the artist, and that's it.
What you do, but you remember the story, you remember the feel of reading that story.
I'm talking about modern comics. You just remember the artist as if that's an artist that you like. Like, that's that artist that I like. He did the cover there.
Yeah, exactly.
What's in the middle.
You don't remember any of the content. Like, as much as I like Nick Spencer's ASM run, if you stuck 20 of those covers in front of me, I could not tell you what I felt when reading each of those comics. Couldn't tell you, because I wouldn't even remember what the story was inside of it in that particular issue. Just in that particular issue.
At this stage in your life, your heart's essentially turned into a lump of coal. You're like the Grinch.
No, yeah, well, yes.
You don't have feelings.
Well, no, I don't, but I don't have feelings, but I can still have memories. I can still generate memories. And I wouldn't be able to even remember what the content of that particular issue was. But
you know what the coolest covers I've seen outside of that really badass Patrick Gleason Spider-Man cover that have come out lately? These are also homages, but they're not comic book homages. they've been horror poster homages. Started out with
Stray
Deceased.
Dogs.
Deceased were awesome. Like they were doing it. They had all these really cool horror homages. And then we got the Stray Dogs, and all the variants on those were horror cover homages, and those were fantastic because it made you remember the movie that it's associated with, not about the comic book, which in the case of Stray Dogs and Deceased, they're both terrific.
Yeah. I mean, now I haven't read either of those books, but I do remember like those covers they stick with me. They like, I remember them. They're memorable covers. Now they are nothing but homages.
Yes.
Most of
what's
the
next? Are we gonna have classic video game art turned into comic book covers so you can remember that time that you played Mario Brothers?
I think they already did those a couple of
Final
years ago.
Fantasy X. That was such a good game. I'm glad it's on Green Lantern this month.
Remember when Marvel did all their hip hop homages to different different 90s rap, but they did a bunch of 90s rap albums with
the cover art,
Marvel
or
covers,
the CD case art.
Yeah. And then DC did their movie posters, just random movie posters, in or sometime near the end of right before Rebirth. Okay. They did that, and then, but no, like the modern ones, there's nothing unique about them.
Here's the thing, Doc. I got to ask you this question. This will we'll start wrapping this thing up. What is the problem? Is it the problem that they aren't giving the cover artist enough flexibility and information about the story on the inside to make a cover that's associated with it that'll get people to go in there? Is the problem that the story on the inside isn't compelling enough, and they know if they show you what's going to be on the inside, it's just not going to bring enough people in, so they have to kind of bait and switch you? Well, look at this fantastic art that you won't see in the book, or look at this homage to something that has nothing to do with the story that's inside of it. Is it that the books are boring? Is it their customers are more discerning? You can only catch their eye with nostalgia bait and stuff like that? Or do you think that the comic industry has kind of put themselves in the corner here?
I think the problem is the decompression. If
there's not always a big event worthy of being on the cover.
Exactly. There's not, and even if there is, you're going to have 5 or 6 covers that are basically telling the same like hint of what's inside, because it's the same fucking story for 5 or 6 issues. You're not going to get, from issue to issue. It's not like, okay, you got, Alpha Flight on the cover of one issue, you got the Shi'ar Imperial Guard on the cover of the next year, you got a Wendigo on the cover of the next issue, and it's one thing after another, and you're seeing a different conflict with a different villain. You're going to be seeing, that's why like the Batman Hush ones did do okay. Like they are relatively iconic because every single time it was Batman versus a different villain on those covers. Whereas, if you were to do one on let's go back to Spider-Man, like recent Spider-Man with the final story, that Sinister War, and the hell was it called? I want to say, what was the final arc in ASM called? Do you remember? Are you there? I think Wes froze. Or I froze. Hello? Hello? Hello?
As you can tell, I had a little bit of a power interruption right here in the Philippines. It happens from time to time. Sometimes interrupts my my recording sessions, my broadcasting. And I think Doc said that he finished up the segment, so I'm going to consider that conversation's over. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time right here on Thinking Critical YouTube.